Hi, I'm Susan. Welcome to my studio, and I want to show you how I create these beautiful ornaments using mostly trash. So let's get started. I'm starting out just with all of these packages. This just annoys the heck out of me that I don't want to put all of this in a landfill, and every time I order something or get something in the mail or sometimes even just buy things from a store, there's all this packaging that I get. What I've decided to do with this is I just take it and I fold it. And I compact it as tight as I can. And then I'm just going to put that other piece on top of it and just keep packing it. Now, if you want to stop along the way here, you've got to go answer the phone or something. Just take a piece of tape and tape the end, and that will hold it for you while you do something else. Now, the biggest thing is to decide how big do you want this. Do you want it this big? Do you want it bigger? I want mine about that big around. I have one previously made. It's that size. I like this size, and I made a smaller one. I'm looking to make a bowl filled with all these hearts. You know how decorators have those orbs or balls that they put in a dish that are just decorated? I want hearts. I just don't want balls. I like hearts better. They're my favorite shape. And so I'm going to create all hearts. If you want to create balls, create balls. But rather than purchase something like this as a base for my heart, I'm just going to create it. Because I have all of this stuff I'm throwing away in it. Now, I like to put some of these thicker labels in the middle and then roll around them. And as you get bigger, you're going to start folding in directions that you feel it fits. And this one has some bubble wrap inside of it. Don't worry, just keep going. And I want this to be a little bit flatter because I want a heart, so I'm just going to try and keep more of that flattened shape. And we're getting close to the shape I want. And when I just can't hold it anymore, I just grab some masking tape. It's easier to give a little hand here. And this is just 1/2-inch masking tape. Any size will do. I find the skinnier one just more manageable to work with. I'm going to use this one. This is a nice thin one. This will be my final layer. And if you have a certain side that has more than the other, just kind of fiddle with it. Stop with this one. And I'll tape this down. Now, you can do this with tape, or if you have any leftover foil scraps. I have these leftover foil scraps. When I put starch onto my felt, I use the foil and I put it on both sides, and after a while it starts to get this gummy buildup. But as you know, I don't like to throw anything out, so this is much more pliable and has a lot more form to it. So I'm just going to use this to help shape my heart better. Foil is much more forgiving. Now, you could just use foil if you wanted, but I try to get rid of those plastic bags in a place that nobody would ever see them. And just play with this. Now, it looks a little bit larger. After I tape this down, because there's so much air in it, it'll tighten up. But use your table, your fists, everything to kind of get it as tight as you can and get the shape you want. Now, for a heart, I like to take my tape and go down the center where I'm making that peak in here and pull this down really tight. And then just start covering it till I get the shape I want. This is one of those things you just have to play with. It only takes a few minutes. And you can see just taping it, I started to get a lot more body to this. So just keep playing with it and fiddling with squishing it down and tightening it up as you go. And you can see where I've pulled it in there. I want to pull that in with my tape. Just like conditioning clay, this is a great stress reliever. And I'm trying to get that little peak at the top pulled in here. So you see how I've got like a little crease in there? I'm just taping over it so it fills over it. You don't see that bump. And see here, I've got the same thing where it goes in. Just tape over it. When we put our next layer on, it'll harden that up. So wherever I have that bump in there, I'm just filling that in. So you see how I have a little gap in there and I'm covering it over to cover that gap? That's what you want to do. It'll smooth it out visually. And I like to cover the whole thing with masking tape just because it helps me get rid of all of these little gaps and bumps. And if there's anywhere that it's sticking out, just press it in and then tape it down tighter. Now you can buy these types of hearts. They're just $3 or $4 a piece. I want this end tighter, so I'm just gonna keep playing with this and squeezing it until I get it. And once I get it perfect, I'll come back. Now I have my hearts all covered with my masking tape, and they're pretty smooth. They're about as smooth as I'm gonna get them. I don't need them to be perfect. When we decorate them like this with all the filigree, you don't really notice all the imperfections very much. So don't beat yourself up trying too hard to get them really perfect. You just need to get your shape pretty good, and that's about it. Now, before I harden this up, because this is still kind of gushy, I like to put a layer of sort of paper mache, and this was inside a pair of boots I just bought. And I normally would throw this paper away, but I can't bear to, so I'm just going to break it up into little pieces. Any kind of paper you have around the house will do this. If you have regular paper from your printer, misprints, just break it up small. I do find ripping the edges, though, gives a much better appearance than when you cut it. And there's also this other paper, which is like newsprint. So all you have to do to break this up is you can almost just pull on it and it just breaks up into little pieces. I just find the smaller pieces easier to work with. So if you get a long piece, just tear it. Now that I have my paper all shredded, I'm going to take some of my glue mixture. My glue mixture is just simply any kind of white glue, and it's 1 part white glue and 2 parts water. Now, it doesn't really matter how much of each you have. You're just looking for the consistency of heavy cream. You're just looking for a glue mixture that'll spread really soft and evenly. So if you have too much glue or too much water, you can mix them however it works best for you. I prefer a little bit more wet mixture. Now I'm just taking my glue mixture, brushing it over top, and adding my little papers one at a time. This will harden this whole piece up and make it much stiffer that it can handle the filigree without denting or falling in. And the other thing is that it'll smooth it out a lot. So I will just continue doing both sides of this and come back and we can add our filigree. But you need about 2 coats of paper on this to really stiffen it up. 1 coat is just not enough. So once you get 1 layer of tissue paper or regular paper, add another one. And where you have, like this is a little dent here, I'll just fill in a little bit more with the paper and that'll smooth that hole out. I don't really mind the wrinkles in it, I mind the dents. And wherever I have a little spot that may have been pushed in more with my finger, I'll just repeat and go over that a few times. And that seems to fill in that area pretty nicely. Now once you get that lumpy piece, you can smooth it over with just another piece on top. And if it's not smooth yet, just keep adding in that area. So you can see where it's starting to smooth out a whole lot better. So I will continue adding all the paper to this, letting it dry, and we will be back. Well, my hearts are all dry now and they're ready to decorate. You can decorate these any way you want. I started decorating some with some filigree, and I really like the way this looks. I've used this mold in a previous video, and I was going to try to use a different mold, but I really like the way they look. I even like them just as natural. I also did another heart where I tried to use a different mold, and that was this one where I used some ferns and the filigree mixed with it. I'm not feeling this one. This one just, it had like a rose thing on it, and I don't know. I liked just this plain filigree I thought looked so much more elegant. So if you want to use different molds or you have different molds, I would definitely give them a try. But if you have this filigree mold, I'm always a proponent of, if I can find one item that I can use for several things, I think it's a much better product. And this is such an inexpensive mold. I'll put the link below. You can get this on eBay, Wish, AliExpress. I'll put the link for one. If it's a dead link in a couple months, you're just going to have to hunt for it. It's one of the most common molds on all the Chinese websites, and it's super squishy. I mean, it's like super squishy rubber. So if you buy this mold for polymer clay, it's worthless. It's just too soft for polymer clay. It's only good for this type of softer clays because it's such a soft, squishy mold, but it makes beautiful, beautiful filigree. And on both sides of this could be extremely beautiful. I have one done on both sides, which would be this one that I have on this side's still wet, you can see it, and this side's dry. But it really looks beautiful when it's done all the way around 360. It gives it such a dimensional look. Let me show you how I do this. Sculpt. I'm using the Sculpey air dry clay. I get mine off of Amazon. I find it to be the most inexpensive. And once you have your mold, I use this other tool, which is just half of a gift card. You can use your fingers, whichever is more comfortable. I just find it's easier to spread it into this because it's such a soft and squishy clay. So when you work with this clay, I just grab small amounts, just a little bit like that at a time. I keep it in a Ziploc bag with a baby wipe, and I zip this up when I'm not working with that other part because I don't want it to dry up. Now see how squishy and soft this clay is? It's really fun to work with. Now I'm taking a little bit of my glue mixture, the same glue mixture that we put on here with the tissue paper. And I like to put this down so it makes a nice wet surface for the clay to stick to. It just makes your filigrees stick so much better. Now you can put this in with the credit card or gift card. I like it where I just spread it in, or you can just use your fingers and spread it in. Either way works really well. It's just whatever floats your boat. If you're looking to get it into these little tiny spaces, I find that gift card a little easier, but some people like the feel of the clay on their fingers. I happen to be one of those guilty people. I like the feeling of the clay. What I really love about this mold is how inexpensive and versatile it is. I love when I can find tools that are very inexpensive and you can get a lot of use out of them. Now the thing that I love about this mold is its super squishiness allows you to just bend it back almost like you're peeling it. And so I didn't use any release in this mold, and you can see how it comes out just perfectly. Now because this is such a large piece, you're just going to have to play and fiddle with it where you put all your little different filigrees, whatever makes you happy. But because there's nothing really much inside, just that packing stuff, they're very lightweight. The only weight we're really having here is the glue and the clay. And the clay will dry a lot lighter. Because it's water-based clay, it's a little bit heavier when it's wet. But just fiddle with this a little bit. And this is where having this clay is so much easier because you can just bend it on a round object or surface like this and fit it all in. Now you can see where I've got this little extra piece of clay in here. You can just take a knitting needle or even a pencil that I just paint the tip over with a little nail polish. Anything that's a smooth type of an object, and blend that in. And in the middle here, that was also extra clay in my mold. So I just want to press that down and blend it in a little bit. Just don't beat yourself up that it has to be perfect. It just has to be pretty. And just blend those little edges a little bit. We're going to put more glue mixture on top of this, so that will help us fill in some of those gaps. But you can see where it's much better now that I just blended that in with a little knitting needle. So here I'll just grab another one, the opposite side. And this one, the design is a little bit deeper. That little edge there has a tendency to break off. So just make sure you push your clay a little further in on that side. Just use your finger, nothing fancy or special. It's actually easier on my table. Now I broke off this little piece on the other one, so I'm going to break off that piece on this one. Sometimes that one little curlicue on this filigree always breaks off on me, so I just break it off intentionally. And the fun of this clay is how you can just bend it. So if you want one curled a little bit more, just move it. And with the glue on the back, it kind of slides, so you don't have to worry about it being stuck. Where if you glued it individually, it may absorb the glue and stick. And there you can see I have it all covered with the filigree. And how that changes how uneven my heart looked. I know it wasn't perfect. It still isn't perfect, but it's all optical illusions. If you can make something look better and fool the eye, it's the way to go. Now I'm just going to take a little bit more of that glue and water mixture, and I'm just going to paint over this. And the reason I'm doing that is I have all these little gaps on the sides and stuff, and that will help fill them in so it won't look like my pieces are falling off. Just don't overwork on top of things. Now if you want, you can take a little brush and blend in where you have any areas that are sticking up, but I find this seems to do just the job. So I'm just pulling it over it, and it'll take a little bit longer to dry, but not a whole lot. This is dry in a couple of hours. I did the other ones a couple hours ago and they're already dry. And here's the dry one, and here's the wet one. So you can see how it's all pulled up, and you can't really see the details as much on that one. You can really see the details on this one a whole lot clearer. It's just once it dries up. But the glue kind of goes underneath all those little filigrees and fills it in quite nicely without filling it in the filigree. So that's why it's real important you get like a heavy cream consistency to your glue, not a really thick consistency. Otherwise you'll lose a lot of these beautiful details. So now we just need to let these dry and finish the back of them, which you don't really need to see how I did that because you've already seen me finish one side. So I will finish both sides of these and come back. Well, now my heart is all dry on both sides, and I'm going to paint it. I've painted some already using some white paint, just any white craft paint will do. These, if you look closely at them, have some cracking in the glaze. And that cracking is because I have the white glue behind it. Now, if you don't like that look, use an oil base or a spray paint and that will not do that. I actually like it because I want these, I was going to put a black glaze on top so they looked more like cement. I wanted them to have that rustic look, but because not everybody wants that rustic look, I'm going to paint this set. I've got half that I've done white and half I'm going to do black, just to give a different look. I've got some Craft Smart black paint and just a little lid here. Now with any of my paints, I always add a little bit of water. Because all of this filigree is so lumpy and bumpy, it's hard to paint. I'd rather put 2 coats on it. I find this seems to be a lot more forgiving if it's really watery. It gets underneath those filigrees and all of those white spots, where if you try to do it and it's really thick, it's really, really hard to paint in there. But if you want to, feel free. I also am using cosmetic brushes, which are really soft, so they don't really get into those areas as well as a stiffer brush. But I find the cosmetic brushes work great. So as you can see, I'll need 2 coats of this black. But the nice thing about the water is if it gets gloppy, it just dries. You don't have a big glop of paint. It just dries, thins out as it goes. Now make sure you spin it around. It makes it a lot easier to see all those little spots you missed, because with the black, it's pretty obvious to see if you missed a spot. With the white, you can't really tell because the filigree is white. I will let this dry, give it another coat, flip it over, and do 2 coats on the other side and come back. Now I have my heart all painted black on both sides. And I found with 2 coats, you don't get this crackle that you get with the 1 coat. You can see how this has that little crackle in it. I like the crackle, but with the black I didn't want the crackle, so I was really glad that with 2 coats it goes away. So if you don't like the crackle, put another coat on. I have some red paint. This is just some red Craft Smart paint. Any inexpensive paint will do. Now I want this to be a little bit graduated in color, so I'm only going to take a little bit of this paint. And I want the center to have more red. And I want it to sort of fade out as it gets to the edges and go to black. So I'm doing the middle, and I know that the black is going to bleed through this, which is really what I want. So you can see how it kind of graduates out, where it fades. And you'll see when this dries. So I want to make sure that the heavier color is in the middle. And I can go over the heavier color. I want to make sure that the center has that beautiful look to it. And let it fade off on the edges and feather into black. So what I'm doing is I'm not really refilling the brush with paint, so that I just get a little touch of it around the edges here. Now the more layers I put on, the more red I'll have. And this is better to do in thin layers than one big gloppy layer, just because you have more control when you have thinner layers. And they dry quicker. Now I'm just going a little bit over the middle so that I get a little bit more brighter red in the middle. You can see how I've got that bright red in the middle, and it's gradually softened into a nice lighter red, which is exactly what I wanted, more of a burgundy. So I'll let that dry. Now my red paint is all dry, and I like the way it kind of feathers out where it goes from light to dark, and it's black on the edges. It's kind of got a goth feel to it. I did it on both sides just to give you an idea. Now you can see some of the black is still sticking out. I don't mind that. I want this to have gold on the filigree, and I'm going to use a little bit of Mod Podge. This one's a matte one. You can use either one. If you have any gold metallic paint, same thing. I happen to have had it all dry out, so I don't want to waste my money and go buy more because it just dries out where I live. And this is just some gold eyeshadow. You can use anything. And just add as much eyeshadow as you want. Mica powders, anything that you have will do the trick. You want about 2 parts eyeshadow to about 1 part Mod Podge. Otherwise, it won't be as metallic. It looks like I have a minuscule nothing amount here. And once you start mixing it, it'll turn into a thicker paste. Basically, it's the same as buying metallic paint. I just don't buy metallic paint anymore because I live in a very hot area. My studio's always hot, and it always dries out on me. Literally, a month later, it's totally dried out. So now you can see I have that paint all mixed, and you really don't need much for this because you're just going to touch the top of your filigree, and you can see how gold that is. It looked like it was nothing when I started, but if you want it less, I didn't really want it as strong as it is on here. Wipe some of this away with my finger. And you can see if just even touching it with my finger is enough. I just have too much on the brush, but it's okay. If you have too much, just wipe it off. It's only paint. You can always repaint over it and do it again. But you can see the difference you get adding that gold and how it just highlights all that filigree. Now this will dry really quickly because you've got so much mica powder in with your medium Mod Podge. You can use any kind of varnish for this also. It just absorbs it really quickly. So if you want it brighter, just go back and touch it up again. If there's a spot you missed, just touch over it. But there you can see what a beautiful effect you get. Hard to believe that was my packaging from my mail. Now here I have one that's just painted white, and you can see all the little crackles. I've only given it 1 coat of white. I like these little crackles because I'm trying to get a cement feel. I want these to have that grayish cement look with the filigree on them. I don't want them to be, I want them to be more subtle, and I feel that the cement look would be really interesting. Now you can do this with any color. What I've done is I've taken a glaze, and the glaze is, it's 1 part water, 1 part paint, and 1 part varnish. This way you can create this consistency. Now you have to color you want. You'll have to mix it and swatch it and see if it works. And I like the way this kind of shows the highlight and the low light. And let me show you one that's already done. Because now that you can see, I've gotten that beautiful high and low. And all I've done with this is I let this dry, and you can see how it got that unusual black and stuff in one side to the other. And then I just took my white paint that I originally started to paint with it, and I took a little brush and I dry brushed it, and that way you got that highlight and low light. And the way I did that was I just took the brush and just touched it onto the high points, same as I would with the gold or the filigree. And you could do this, like I said, with any color. You can do these however you can imagine, but you can see how you get this beautiful effect. And I just wanted this to be more like a garden stone type of a look. I thought they'd be really pretty in a bowl with some moss. I don't want them to look too Valentine-y that I can't use them all year. And just a little bit of white paint that I painted this originally with is all I'm using. And you can see how I've got that highlight versus over here where I haven't done it. You can see how it switches it right up. And I'm not being really neat or particular. I'm just getting those high points, and it just gives it a lot more definition. So you can see how it gives that rustic kind of a look, which is really what I was going for with this color. So anything you can imagine you could do with these, but it's hard to believe that this was my original packaging. Now when you see it, it looks like it was an ornament that I purchased, not something I was throwing in the trash. And here you can see that I put them on my dining room table with some large candlesticks, and I have a hexagon one because I didn't want to make them all hearts. I wanted to show you you can make any shape or size that you like. I just was into the hearts because I thought they looked kind of neat for Valentine's Day, but I wanted to give it an outdoor effect, so I added some moss underneath, and this way it looks much more like an all year type of thing rather than just a Valentine's type of display. And here you can see my red hearts with the black and how they look so different when I put them in a crystal bowl on a silver tray, and this way it gave much more of a Valentine-y vibe. But these you could leave out all year. They're definitely not limited to just Valentine's Day. Now you could also put a hanger on them and hang them, but I preferred to have something as bowl stuffers because I just have so many things hanging around my house. I wanted something that I could just put on an end table or do a tablescape with. But I hope I gave you lots of neat ideas, and you could make these in any shape or color to fit your decor. And thanks for watching.